Welcome to Season 2 of the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in Child First coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today's guest is wheelchair basketball player and coach, Ryan Miskovics. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. This is a really special one for us because, like I said to you before we started recording, normally I write a bit of a script and lots of questions, and today we're going to take a bit of a different approach. It's going to be more of a chat because I think there's probably more that you can offer us and more that you can tell us that I won't know the right questions to ask because these are lived experiences of yours.
For sure, yeah.
So I think probably a good jump off point for us today is for you to tell us about your sporting journey.
Yeah.
What sports you participate in and how you started getting involved in those sports.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is my first podcast, so I'm very, very hyped to be here. You guys got an awesome venue. I'm really grateful for giving me the opportunity, really. I was born in St. Catharines, Canada, a very small town. At the age of 4, I was diagnosed with my condition, Charcot-Marie Tooth type 2A. It's a neurological condition that is a very common condition, actually. 1 in 5,000 people have it. So around maybe 12 to 60 million people on the planet have this condition. And my family went to Hungary first because we're Hungarian. And we tried to get a diagnosis in Hungary. Unfortunately, technology and even the knowledge about the disease wasn't really known back then about my condition. So they couldn't provide me with a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So in around about 2004, 2005, that's when we came here for a week. And I got diagnosed at the Great Ormond Street Hospital by a professor called Professor Mary Riley. She was the one that diagnosed me with my condition. And basically, I don't remember much because I was really young. But she said that this condition is going to be progressive. And it's going to hit me really hard when I hit puberty, so 12, 13. Because as you grow, it's just going to be a lot more difficult with the bones growing and everything, the muscle strain and all of that. So her main advice was exercise as much as you can. That's how you can slow the progression of the disease.
Okay.
But reality is nobody really had to tell me to exercise. I was naturally a very, very active kid. Like my mom used to put me down and I used to just run straight. Like I used to run and just be active, and I grew up in Hungary. So from 2004 to 2012, I was kindergarten, primary school. I was raised in Hungary with my grandparents. And I used to cycle. I used to swim. I used to do athletics. I used to play football. I used to do everything. And my grandma especially, she was very protective of me because she didn't want me to get injured. Mm-hmm. She was like, be careful. And even my family members, they were surprised of how active I was. And I never really thought about anything about my disability at the time. When you're a kid, you don't really think about these type of things. You just want to play and you just want to make friends. So I had a very, very active childhood. And at the age of 7 or 8, that's when I started competitive swimming. Because swimming is one of those sports that you can't really get injured. It's very difficult to get injured because you're in the water.
Yeah.
So I used to swim 5 times a week, swim about 3.5 kilometers. And in Hungary, swimming is one of the most popular sports.
Yeah.
So they take really big pride in swimming and water polo. Like it's, when it comes to Olympics, there's a lot of good Hungarian swimmers out there. So I was the only disabled swimmer there, and I used to put the work in twice as hard. And I used to swim from the age of 8 all the way to the age of 19. And at the age of 19, that's when I started my coaching journey with University of East London. I got my level 1, level 2, FA level 2. Mm-hmm. And I got my wheelchair basketball coaching qualification as well. And I'm trying to get my swimming qualification as well. So I'm trying to be as versatile as possible.
A Swiss Army knife of sports participation and sports coaching. What I find really interesting from the story that you've just told of your upbringing and your involvement in sport from a young age is that it sounds like, for the most part, you were a disabled athlete in an able-bodied arena. Yeah. So lots of people around you who weren't disabled.
Yeah.
How much from an early age did that teach you about self-advocacy and finding your voice as somebody perhaps who had different needs in that space and setting?
I was very vocal about my needs. I knew from an early age of the things that I can and can't do. But because I was so competitive, I always focused about winning. I was a very like winning focused individual athlete. So I never really cared. And swimming and competitive sports has allowed me to believe in myself, to really give me that confidence, to really understand who I am as a man. So it just gave me all the essential tools to deal with life, to deal with resilience, to deal with everything. So nobody really had to come to me to teach me these things. Obviously, I had great coaches, but it was just me that really fueled myself in a way. When it comes to like competition, or when it comes to training, or every single day, all I was thinking about is how can I be faster, how can I beat these guys. In a way, it was kind of motivating, the fact that I was the only disabled person there, because everyone had a head start in a way. So I had to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So yeah.
As a young person with a disability and having to use your own voice in that space, I'd imagine that a lot of the time it's not about telling people what you can't do. It's in fact telling people what you can do. So how much did you have to find from a very early age your voice, your place to be able to say, don't count me out because I'm disabled. I can do this and I want to do this.
Well, I think there's 2 different attitudes. There's the Eastern European attitude, right, which is still behind the Western attitude, because in Hungary and in a lot of Eastern European countries, they still think about disabled people as second-class citizens, And then I came to the UK and I realized, okay, the behavior is a lot better, but it's still not at the place where it should be, But the number one thing I hate is pity. It's that, I feel sorry for you. I never wanted that, to feel like a victim. And I think that's why I've always wanted to be better and improve myself. And at the age of 15, 16, that's when I found my voice, really, and try to vocalize that and try to stand up for what I believe in. But when you're 13, 14, you're very nervous because you want to make friends, you want to be popular, you want to be impressionable, So, I was going through a really dark and difficult time at that age, because that's when my disability started to really affect me psychologically as well, and even physically. So I was very nervous. And then college came about and started to meet people and started being more outgoing. And then I evolved into this confident and vocal person. And this is what allowed me to become a coach and continue my coaching journey. So majority of the stuff I was going through is self-led. I've had to realize a lot of things about how society works in general. And, when I meet somebody for the first time, they don't look at me in the eyes. They just look at my wheelchair. And I got angry about it in the beginning, but now I kind of got used to it, the stares and everything, because you can't change everybody's opinion. You can't change everybody's mind, because that will take the energy out of you, So you really got to find an opportunity of when to voice your opinion, when to fight that battle, because you can't convince the whole population, because their minds are already set from an early age, or from parenting or culture or background or whatever,
Societally, there is an argument that we deal with disability as a monolith, that we think of all people who are disabled as the same, with the same needs, the same wants, the same things that hold them back. Do you think it's the same in sport, or do you think sport provides a more even playing field for people with disabilities?
I think it depends on the environment, and this is where the coach comes in. This is where the sports leaders come into place. Because if a sports leader is able to provide that environment where you're able to express yourself, and the coach understands your limitations and what you can do, right? The coach doesn't need to have a detailed understanding of what your condition is. He just needs to have a detailed understanding of who you are as a person and what you can and can't do. And just provide that environment. Make it inclusive, make it engaging, make it fun. I don't think disabled people should have special treatment. Just treat them like how you would treat a normal individual, So it's like education. Education is so important, because majority of the time people are afraid of things that they don't know about. You know, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. Oh, I don't know about that. But once you're educated about it, and once you start meeting people, then you kind of have a better understanding about things, you know.
Have the best sports coaches in your experiences been the ones who've recognised that they need to coach your limitations or coach your ambitions?
Coach my ambitions, because I was already an ambitious individual, so they knew the ceilings that I could go to. So it's all about providing those motivational tools, being a good person in general. I think majority of the coaches just need to be approachable and social, and just be a good person overall. Because if you're a good person, people will approach you. You know, it's all about energy. If you have a positive energy, people will gravitate towards you. So majority of the coaches, the best coaches that I've met, had awesome energies, and they were like mentors in a way. You know, where I could approach them and talk about what I'm going through, and psychologically what I'm going through, and my family issues. So they weren't just coaches; they were mentors, and I'm really grateful for the coaches that I've met, the swimming coaches that I met, because they were really awesome people, which helped my journey along competitive sports.
When we look at the provisional barriers that are in the way for disabled athletes, it's really easy to think about the obvious ones like step access and things like that. But how often times do you think that the barriers in provision are actually coaches who don't know how to coach disabled athletes, or perhaps look at you as a disabled athlete and not as a human being who's participating in the sport?
Yeah, well, I think, and this might be a wild take, but I think coaching should be integrated into the school curriculum, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think it should be involved within GCSE PE, because I think coaching is one of the best social exercises that you could do. Not just coaching one group, but coaching different groups, coaching elderly, coaching young children, coaching disabled people, learning disabilities. If you put yourself in these experiences when you're a young child, right, and they might be uncomfortable in the beginning, but you kind of get used to these social interactions in the beginning when you're 11, 12, when you develop that maturity, it could help you deal with it when you're an adult. Because when you're an adult, right, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, it's a lot harder to make that change. It's a lot harder to get into uncomfortable situations, because your brain is already wired in a sense. The best thing to do is target young children at an early age and teach them about these things from a very early age, so that they understand these things. It's a lot. There's a saying that goes, it's a lot harder to teach an old dog a trick, right? And the same things with human beings. You know, I truly believe that coaching should be a thing in GCSE sports. I don't know how it's not in there already.
Do you think when you talk about teaching coaching, is that about teaching young people to have a voice?
Yeah. It's all about the projection of your voice, how to communicate, how to use your body, how to look somebody in the eye. There's a lot of young people that don't look the person in the eye when they're talking. And that's such a key element of communication, right? So just teaching them these basics could help them, not just with coaching, but with work, with professional life, with everything, you know. And coaching really does help, because you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, and you gotta be the one who's also a role model, who's also leading by example, who's motivating others. And the problem right now in this generation, in my opinion, is we're lacking young leaders, and we're also lacking leaders in different groups. You know, disabled leaders, young leaders. You know, we need more leaders in general. I think that's what coaching helps. Is if you're a young coach, right, and you're part of a session, you look at that young coach and you think, wow, that kid is the same age as me. What is he doing? I want to be like him, you know, instead of maybe an elderly coach teaching, you know. So I really believe that there should be leaders from different age groups, different backgrounds, so that you can look up to that person and think, okay, I can do that, you know.
You talk about age groups and backgrounds, and if we talk about diversity and inclusion, perhaps the group that does get most overlooked is disabled people. What impact do you think it has on young people if they're being coached by a disabled coach, even if they're not disabled themselves?
Well, I was coaching at a football club called Falcons FC, and I was the only disabled coach there. And I was coaching 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, right? And what I realized is kids don't really care about if you have a disability or not. They just want to go out there and play. They don't think about, oh, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with that? Yeah, they do in the beginning when you first meet them, but then you explain it, right? You really have to address the elephant in the room because they will ask you these questions. Oh, what's wrong with you? And I'll explain to them briefly, but not in a detailed way, right? And once you explain to them and once you're comfortable with addressing it, then they just go on and play. So it's all about addressing and being comfortable with talking about your condition. You know, there's a lot of people who have disabilities who are not confident with addressing their disabilities, you know. And it's an elephant in the room because people will ask, you know.
How much can adult coaches learn from children the way that they approach people with disabilities?
Oh, a lot. I think children can be so emotionally intelligent. Children are a lot more intelligent than we think they are, you know. And children, you know, they're very like straightforward with things. You know, hey, you know, I want to play more, or oh, I think this drill should be set in a way where you can score more goals, or you know, they tell you directly. And as a coach, you have two options. Either I ignore it, or either I listen to it and I adapt my session based on the needs of the players. Because as a coach, your number one priority is it fun? It has to be fun. I think a lot of coaches, and it doesn't even matter about the levels. It could be professional, amateur. It has to be fun because that way it's a lot more easier to get the learning outcomes than compared to the coach speaking for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. You know, it's like, I just like to speak for 30 seconds, then I go out. You know, it's like, how can I reduce my speaking time? Because when you're coaching, it's not about you. It's about the players. Because they're coming back from school. They just had, you know, as a kid, it's actually kind of tiring because you go to school at 8:30, right? And you finish at, 3:30. And by the time your brain's all over the place, you're overloaded with information. You know, you have a big energy dump as well, and you might be in year 10, year 11, you might be focusing on your exam, right?
Yeah.
So the worst thing is when you go to a session and there's a coach talking for 40, 50 minutes about how you should do this. I don't like that. I just like to set them up and let them do their thing, and then they discover it themselves, you know.
It's clear, listening to you, that fun and play are central in your attitudes to coaching and the way that you set the agenda when you're coaching.
Yeah.
As a disabled athlete growing up, do you think that fun and play actually gets lost for a lot of disabled athletes because you are seen as the disability and not as the young athlete? Do you think that play gets left out?
Oh, yeah. Because as you get, in my experience, as I got older, it's a lot more, my disability has become a psychological battle instead of a physical one. Because it's like, you know, as an adult, you're growing up, you have more responsibilities, you got bills to pay, you know, adult stuff comes into the picture. Plus, then you got to deal with a disability that feels like a burden, you know. So there's so many psychological elements that you got to deal with, especially if your condition is severe as well, which stops you from becoming your true self.
Yeah.
Sometimes even me, like when I really want to apply for an opportunity, I sometimes think about my disability first instead of actually going for it. So coaches who have disability, I feel like the number one thing is make sure that they're physically and psychologically well. And I prioritize my psychological and my physical health number one. It has to be there. Because if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't take care of others. And that's what coaching is all about, is making sure that you're taking care of others, not just in a performance way, but health and safety ways, safeguarding ways, in all different types of ways. So it's making sure that you're okay first, having that support group that takes care of you, and then you can have a go at whatever you want. Because you see, I need my physiotherapy. I need to go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. I need to speak to a counselor. I need to do a lot of work before I actually go in there and do coaching and perform the best I can possibly do. So it's all about having that support group and taking care of yourself first before you can do anything, really.
When you were a young athlete and you were coming through and you were starting playing wheelchair basketball, and when you were first in the UK, do you feel like coaches knew how to treat a disabled athlete, or do you feel like you perhaps were just a disabled athlete, not Ryan?
The thing is, what I like about myself is I don't really care about what other people think.
Yeah.
And it's such a good skill to have, because there's a difference between accepting criticism, like feedback, like proper feedback, and then there's a difference between accepting judgment, And at a young age, I already knew that people will be uncomfortable with disabled people, because even my family members were uncomfortable with disabled people. So even at a young age, I knew that is the attitude, no matter where I go. So I knew that. And I knew who I was at a very young age in terms of I'm an ambitious individual. I know who I am. Nobody can change who I am. So my disability doesn't define me. Your disability doesn't define you, because it's not who you are. Who you are is how you treat people, your values, your ambition. So I already knew that at a young age. So no matter what happened.
How do you use your voice when you can sense that somebody's got discomfort with your disability?
How do I use my voice?
When you were young and you had a coach, you could tell wasn't that comfortable with having you in a session, that saw you as Ryan, the wheelchair user, not Ryan, the person who wanted to be an athlete, be a swimmer, take part in football, whatever those things were. How much did you feel that the onus was on you to fight your own corner? And how difficult is that when you're a young person to have that voice?
It's extremely difficult. When you're young and you're facing these difficulties, right? It's very, very difficult to address somebody who's 20, 30 years older than you, because you might come across as disrespectful. So this is the thing with the dynamics of an older and younger person, right? You're scared to truly express your voice because you're scared that you might be kicked out of the team, that you might go into detention, or you're scared of the consequences. So at a young age, I was not really confident with addressing myself. It took me a lot of years to develop this confidence. I think there's rarely any 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old who's actually confident enough to go up to the teacher or the coach and say, hey, I don't feel like this is working out, so it takes courage.
But that's what we need to improve. So what would be your advice to coaches who need to listen more, who can't listen because of that age gap?
Well, I think CPD opportunities, workshops, even just education in general, about the importance of listening to young people, about the consequences it can lead to. I feel like it's very, very important to talk about the consequences of it, because children, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their family story is like. So them attending the session might be their only time of joy and enjoyment. And if you're a coach who doesn't listen to the kid, then you can really be the reason why that kid doesn't want to do the only thing that he or she enjoys. So it's really, really important to think about the consequences of your actions and what you say as a coach, because as a coach, people look up to you. As a coach, people look at you as a role model, by default. So you've got to act in the right way. And I don't think everybody should be a coach, because it's not for everybody. I think we should make these qualifications a little bit more stricter and have a more personal approach. How are you as a person? How do you socialize as a person? How do you deal with difficult situations? Because as a coach, you deal with a lot of difficult situations. There's safeguarding concerns. A parent might show up late. You see a lot of dark stuff, right? And if you don't deal with it in the right way, that could lead to even bigger consequences. I'm trying to say. So it's like, how are you as a person? What do you do? How do you observe things? Instead of more about the sport, because yes, it's important to know about the sport.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to be observant and understand clues and understand like the environment that you're in. Because with sports, I mean, there's a, you can read books, you can listen to a podcast, you can do a lot of things to understand more about the sport, right? You can watch a game, but it's a lot more difficult to understand how to be social and how to psychologically motivate somebody when they're down. So it's all about being a good person, as I said.
You've talked about the fact that you're ambitious and that you love sport, but are there negative coaching experiences that you had growing up that have informed the fact that you want to be a coach and that you want to be a good coach?
Yes, of course I had negative experiences, which is why I wanted to be a coach in the first place, because it's like I can learn from these negative experiences. There was a time when I had a PE lesson in Hungary and everybody was playing outside, and the teacher just said, "Hey, here's a basketball, just play." I'm just like, so what? So everyone's going to go outside and do their thing, and I'm just inside playing with basketball. So just like, oh, I can't really be bothered to adapt this session for you. So here, I'm just going to give you a basketball. Here, play. And I understand why he did it, because the education's not there, of course, and he didn't know how to deal with that. But it's not right, So having these negative experiences has definitely made me think, okay, when I become a coach, I'll make sure that everybody's engaged, So I think you got to have these negative experiences as well, because it's life. You will have negative experiences, especially if you're a disabled person. You will have these experiences. So it's all about learning from them and having that coping mechanism. Okay, if I have a good coping mechanism, then I can learn from it and take things away from it, instead of being like, oh yeah, I'm disabled. Oh, maybe it's right that they treat me this way. Oh, maybe I shouldn't be this, or maybe I shouldn't participate. There's two ways you can take it. And one way can take you really high up, and one way can destroy you mentally.
Are there examples of really positive coaching experiences you've had, though, that have inspired you to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, I've met a lot of awesome coaches, especially swimming coaches who I could go to. I could express my thoughts. They even asked me, "Hey, what do you think about that session?" I think as a coach, that's the best thing you could do is get feedback from the players. Hey, what didn't you like about this? Or how did that session make you feel? Oh, I saw it from your facial expression that there was something wrong with it. So it's like observing and then asking that question is important, that those open-ended questions. And majority of the coaches that I've had the opportunity to meet, they were just they were really observant.
One of the things that we've talked about with a child-first approach and children's advocacy is that creating a space for the conversation is the most important thing. Do you think that comes from just directly asking the people that you're coaching how they're enjoying sessions? Because you've talked there about feeding off of facial expression and body reactions and stuff like that. So as a coach, is that how you get to grips with what children want to be doing in sessions?
I think it's also really important to address the parents. Very, very important to address the parents, because the parents are the key for the child's engagement. If the parents are not with it, then the child is not going to be there. So it's very, very important that, yes, there's you're focusing on the child, but you're also focusing on the parents and what their attitude is and what their behavior is, So you got to have those conversations with them at in a session or before the session. Make sure they're watching your session. So make sure they're not too involved, but to the point where they can still understand what you're trying to do. Because if they know what you're trying to do, then it makes it a lot easier for the child to be engaged as well. Because there's nothing worse than seeing a parent who's not supportive. Because that will bring the child down, and that's the sports journey done. And they have so much potential, not in a performance wise, but just generally to improve their social skills or psychological skills. So make sure that the parents understand what you're trying to do, what is your aim, who you are as a person, what your values are, what is your code of conduct. So everybody understands.
One of the questions that I ask quite frequently on this podcast is, where does play fit in for you as a coach?
Oh, from the start. Like, even the warm-up has to be playful. Even the cool down. Everything has to have like a fun engagement way. It's like Sometimes when I started my coaching journey, I was very big on dribbling through the cones, and there was like a lineup, right, where the kids lined up, and it's like, okay, they're just waiting for them to have their go, and it's like, maybe that's not the best way. Maybe just make sure that the ball's rolling constantly, because if the ball is rolling constantly, that will just give them more time to self-discover things. Children are very, very creative, and they're so quick to discover a new skill or discover a new way of doing things, because as a coach, right, you always think about, oh, there's only one way, right? There's only one way, it's my way, and there's no other way, right? But then the kids come up with alternative ways of doing things, and then you spot, okay, who's the leader in the group, or who's the more mature one in the group, and then you assign them an individual task which gives them more ownership. For example, what I like to do is I pick out a player who I see is more mature, and I just say to them, hey, can you help me set up the drill for me, or can you help explaining what this is? So you're kind of giving them a bit more ownership, and this will improve their leadership skills and their social skills. Coaching should not be about improving the player, it should be all about improving the person, because if you improve the person, it will naturally come to them if they have the passion for it.
How much more important is that in disability sport coaching, when you might have a group of participants who are of varying ability and success at the end of sessions? How much more important is it for play to be part of that?
This is where positive feedback comes from. When you're like, that was awesome, that's an awesome shot, or just like constantly giving them praises and constantly elevating them, but have meaning behind those praises, not just generic, right? Making sure that their self-esteem goes up. That's the most important thing, especially to people that have disabilities. Majority of them have low self-esteem because of their condition. So it's very important that you as a coach, even if they're not doing it the best way, make sure that they're encouraged, make sure that they're hyped at the end of the session, because that way that feeling is gonna progress and go forward into the next session, and they will come with a smile on their faces. So it's all about that positive encouragement and what you say as a coach that would directly affect them in terms of their engagement.
Did that maintain your participation in sport when you were growing up?
100%. When you have when you make a mistake, right? So I looked at the coach all the time because I wanted to see their reaction. And whenever my coach gave me a thumbs up or clapped, or even just brought me to the side and said, this is what you were doing well, okay, this is what we should improve on. Having that constructive feedback is so important, because yes, the coach gives you the things that you should work on, but it also praises you, so you have something to look forward to. If you just go up to a disabled person and be like, hey, this is why you didn't do this and didn't do that, their self-esteem is already low. If you do that, right, then it's just gonna go to an all-time low, and they're never gonna participate in sports, because one bad experience is enough to not do anything, not do any type of exercises or sports, which could lead to health problems. Yeah.
When you earlier in the pod talked about changing attitudes towards sports and disability sport, I'm imagining that for you, you're probably pretty unique as a disabled coach. I know that isn't your identity, but as a coach with a disability.
Yeah.
So if you were looking at what you want sport to look like in another 10 to 15 years' time, what involvement do people with disabilities have, and how can we widen the bandwidth so that they have got more access?
This is a difficult question to answer, because it comes down to, London is so diverse, right? And we got so many different diverse boroughs. Some boroughs provide more accessibility when it comes to sport, and there are some boroughs that don't even really look at disabled people as so it's you got to think from borough to borough. Like the borough, I live in Barking, right, but I'm very close to Newham, and Newham is one of those boroughs that are really inactive.
Okay.
And disabled people, there's not many opportunities for them, especially in East Ham. So it's all about how can you change the attitudes of the people that are higher up, right? Because at the end of the day, the people who are in those high positions control the narrative of, okay, where does the money go? What's important? And how do you change attitudes, right? Is it having a guest speaker over who's, who's gone through difficult experiences, or a sports leader, or providing workshops, or, how do you change attitudes? I think that's the number one question you've got to ask yourself, right? How do we make sure that schools are in touch with sports development officers? I think schools are so important because they're the ones that help children get engaged within sports. So it's a really difficult question to ask, but I think change has to start from the high positions. But I know that's not realistic. I think what we got to do is have leadership groups such as the LYG, London Youth Games Leadership Team, and LYG 33, who consist of a lot of young leaders who have different backgrounds, who have different sporting history, and they voice their opinions. And there are so many of them who are so intelligent and they're so talented, right? And that's what's going to help tackle these barriers and these issues, because it's not just me that cares. There's a lot of people that care about these things, and the community will win eventually. It's just a matter of time. If you have enough people behind a problem to tackle this problem, then eventually things will get better, in my opinion. It's all about having those young leaders, having those leaders from different backgrounds to voice their opinion and be confident.
Well, bringing it back to young people's voices feels like the perfect place to leave this podcast, because that's exactly what we're about on Play Their Way. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today. You've been a great guest. And thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might enjoy it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.